Yes, G.S. Paul again. You are welcome. We'll look at the brain today. And by the way, this is how the brain is present in our body. Had it been a lesson in classroom, in person, I would have brought a skull of a goat or that of a sheep and have removed the skin and the skull, and then I would have taken the brain to show you. And as you look at the brain, in case of human body, it is almost like that in the region of the head. Now, if it had been a lesson in person, I would have opened up and taken out the brain itself to show you how does it look like. It looks like almost the walnut-like. It has many fissures. It has many grooves, many depressions, and these depressions and grooves are called sulci or the gyri. The plural is sulci and singular is sulcus. Similarly, for the ridges, the singular is gyrus and the plural is gyri. It is believed that the greater the number of these ridges and furrows in the brain, the more is the intelligence. The reason behind this is actually the brain, nervous matter, is packed in the skull, very well packed, thus developing those grooves and ridges, which increases actually the number of cells. Now, the brain, as we look at it, it looks gray from the outside. The gray matter, I have already told you, consists of the nerve cells, the neurons, the body of the neuron, and white matter consists of the axons and the nerve cells. The fibers. Now, in case of brain, as we look at it, it appears to be in three parts. We can divide it: the forebrain, the midbrain, and the hindbrain. This is the forebrain, that is the midbrain, and this is the hindbrain. The forebrain is actually that part of the brain which lies in the region of the forehead. Now, the brain as such consists of three parts: the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and medulla oblongata. Cerebrum, cerebellum, and medulla oblongata. We shall look at the cerebrum first. Cerebrum is actually 1/3, actually 72% of the total brain. Actually, the word cerebrum also means the brain. Now, this is the cerebrum. Look at it. And this portion is cerebellum. And this portion is medulla oblongata. Now, cerebrum, as I said, consists of around 72% of the brain. And actually, this is called the brain, cerebrum. Cerebrum is divided into four portions. The frontal, which lies in the region of the forehead, the parietal, which lies below the top of the head, the occipital, which lies towards the neck, and the temporal, which lies close to the ears. Now, the whole cerebrum is divided into two hemispheres. We may not be able to see the two parts of the cerebrum when we see it from the side, but when we see it from the ventral side of the brain like that, then we see it is divided into two hemispheres, the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere, by means of a furrow which runs across the brain like that. The right hemisphere and the left hemisphere. The right hemisphere of the brain controls the left side of the body, and left hemisphere controls the right side of the body. The two hemispheres are connected in the middle by means of a nervous matter called corpus callosum. What I mean is that the two hemispheres are connected like this by means of a nervous matter which lies here, corpus callosum. Now, the frontal part of the cerebrum controls the intelligence, the remembering, the concentration, the retention, and then the recall. While the occipital region controls the emotions and the hunger and satiety. Emotions means when you look at something and you feel bad or feeling good. Those are the emotions. The occipital portion controls the vision and other sensory organs, whereas the temporal lobe controls the senses. That means the sense of hearing, sense of sight, sense of smell, sense of taste, and sense of touch. The whole cerebrum actually controls the entire body, entire body. Now that's why it is called as the brain. Now, when we see from the brain, from the ventral side, it has a nervous matter called the thalamus. And the region above is the epithalamus, and the region below is hypothalamus. Now, the region epithalamus has a bean-shaped body hanging by means of a stalk called the pineal body. The pineal body happens to lie in between the eyes, here. Therefore, it is also called the third eye. Now, it is called third eye because it is sensitive to light. That means it controls or it senses the presence of light and the darkness. It is in the darkness that the pineal body secretes a fluid called the melatonin. And it is the melatonin which makes you feel like sleeping. And during the daytime, there is no melatonin coming from the pineal body. Thus, the pineal body is an organ, is a portion of the brain which controls the coming up of the sun and going off the sun, which is called circadian cycle. Pineal body is responsible for circadian cycle, and this is there in all animals, including the birds and the fishes and reptiles, etc. And it has the same function. Now, towards the lower side, at the hypothalamus, there's another structure which is grape-like, hanging from the hypothalamus. The structure which makes it hang from the hypothalamus is called infundibulum. And the portion of the hypothalamus where it is attached, the hypothalamus, that portion is called the median eminence. And this grape-like structure is called the pituitary body. Now, pituitary body is also called the master gland because it includes all the functions of the body. It is because of it secretes certain hormones, and those hormones get through into the blood and goes to the different parts of the blood, and those hormones make this body work. For example, it secretes a hormone which is responsible for growth hormone. It secretes a hormone which makes the thyroid work, thyroid stimulating hormone. It secretes the hormone which makes the sexual organs work, and that is called the sex hormone. So it controls almost all the parts, all the functions of the body in human being and in other animals also, but at present we are concerned with the human beings. The whole structure, this is called the diencephalon, and this diencephalon has a space within a cavity, and this is called diaceal. Now, these cerebral hemispheres are also hollow from within, and the cavity of the cerebral hemispheres is called the first ventricle and the second ventricle. The space, this is the diaceal. The space in the diencephalon is called the third ventricle or diaceal. The first ventricle, the second ventricle, and the third ventricle are connected through this channel, and this channel is called iter. Now, the cerebrum starts working, actually the whole brain starts working when the baby is still developing, but the heart starts working before the brain. Actually, both the brain and the heart start their development after around 6 weeks of conception. But heart starts working after around 7-8 weeks, pumping blood. And it sends the blood to all parts of the body, being the ones which are developing, including the brain. The thing that I want to bring before you is that both the brain and the heart, though start developing almost at the same time, but the heart starts functioning before the brain. Brain starts, it completes its development, of course, with the development of the baby, but it starts functioning much later than the heart. If you are asked which portion of the body is most important, the heart or the brain, I'm sure you will say the brain at this stage. But this is the heart which sends the blood to the brain and it starts working, or it's working. A human body without working brain is called as a vegetative body. The brain is there, but it's not working because of some reason or the other. And the main reason is the blood supply is not there. The blood supply is hampered, or some of the cells of the brain are not getting enough blood, so those parts which are being controlled by that particular part of the brain stop working. For example, the right side of the body stops working if the left side of the brain is not receiving enough blood, and the left part of the brain is receiving blood, so the right part of the body keeps on working. But if the blood supply is hampered for the whole brain, the brain stops working, but the human body is there. Such a human body in which the brain is not working is called a vegetative body. So, heart is more important. But of course, we cannot say that heart is more important, because the functioning of the heart, the working of the heart is also controlled by the brain. And that part of the brain is, of course, we'll come to it later on, is medulla oblongata. If medulla oblongata is injured, the heart stops. But when the heart stops, brain automatically stops. So this is about cerebrum. And I have told you the four parts of this cerebrum: frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, the occipital lobe, and the temporal lobe. And in addition to that, the third portion, dencephalon. This is part of the fourth brain. Now we come to the second part of the brain, which is cerebellum. Cerebellum is around 10% of the brain, and it is also called small brain. And it lies below the cerebrum and behind the medulla oblongata, of course, above the spinal cord. If we look at the cerebellum, it looks like this. It is also divided into two parts, the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere. The nervous matter which divides it into two is called the vermis, V-E-R-M-I-S, 2 lobes. And the whole cerebellum is divided into 3 lobes by means of a fissure, horizontal fissure, a primary fissure, and a horizontal fissure, and a posterior fissure, thus making the anterior lobe of the cerebellum, posterior lobe of the cerebellum, and this is called the follicular lobe of the cerebellum. As the name indicates, cerebellum is that part of the brain which controls the equilibrium and, 'and, 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 ' the balance of the body is controlled by cerebellum. And the cerebellum is also very well developed in case of human beings. For example, when you are riding a bicycle, this is the responsibility of the cerebellum to balance your body. If you are swimming, this is the responsibility of the cerebellum to control your equilibrium. And the cerebellum, of course, develops after the development of the cerebrum. Actually, in the development of the brain, it is said that the brain's development is cephalocaudal. That means from the head region to the tail region. That means from the upper portion to the tail portion. Interesting. If the baby is born, the baby can control, the cerebrum starts working, which means it controls the working of the eyes, the hearing, the hunger, satiety, and the center of satiety or a center of hunger, and then hearing, then that is the cerebrum starts functioning first. Cerebellum, no. Cerebellum starts functioning quite later, because the baby starts walking or moving legs or arms a bit later, and the equilibrium, the cerebellum, the walking, the baby develops, starts controlling the balance of the body or the equilibrium later, after a year or so. So cerebellum develops little later, that has to be understood. And this is interesting also. Now, after cerebellum, we have medulla oblongata. This is a band of nervous matter which lies below the cerebrum and in front of the cerebellum and above the spinal cord. Here it is. Below the cerebrum, in front of the cerebellum, and above the spinal cord. Medulla oblongata is also one of the important portions of the brain. It controls the heartbeat and the breathing. This is very interesting again. The heart is mine, but it's not under my control. It is under the control of medulla oblongata. Medulla oblongata is mine, but it's not under my control. Medulla oblongata is controlled by the higher centers of the brain. And if those higher centers of the brain are injured or stop working, medulla oblongata will also start working. And hence the heart will stop working. Isn't it interesting that while sitting here, we often say, I know everything and I am master of myself. Oh, gentlemen, you are not master of anything. Your heart is not under your control. Your heart is under the control of medulla oblongata, which is not under your control. Medulla oblongata is under the control of the higher centers of the brain, and higher centers of your brain are not under your control. Interesting. Now, the medulla oblongata is also hollow from within, and the cavity of the medulla oblongata is called metacele. And this metacele are the fourth ventricle. This metacele or the fourth ventricle is connected to the third ventricle in such a way that first ventricle, second ventricle are connected to third ventricle, and third ventricle is connected to fourth ventricle, and fourth ventricle is connected with the cavity of the spinal cord, neurocele, in such a way that the whole nervous system, the brain and the spinal cord have cavities inside. And all these cavities, I repeat, first ventricle, second ventricle, third ventricle, fourth ventricle, and neurocele are filled with the fluid called cerebrospinal fluid. I'm sure you remember, I have already mentioned the cerebrospinal fluid while describing the nervous system in general, and it is present around the whole nervous matter, in between the dura mater and arachnoid, subdural space, in between the arachnoid and the pia mater, subarachnoidal space. The whole space is filled with the fluid, and this fluid is common with the cerebrospinal fluid of these ventricles. Now, this cerebrospinal, the arrangement, the construction is so strange that it makes you feel different. The cerebrospinal fluid has main function to make the whole nervous system sort of weightless. It develops the buoyancy of the nervous system. I hope you understand buoyancy, probably in physics. Not only that, it is through this cerebrospinal fluid that the whole nervous matter receives its nourishment. I mean, the nutrition, the oxygen, and the other things required for the neurons. And from the blood, of course. And all the waste products from the nervous matter, that of brain and the spinal cord, they come back into the cerebrospinal fluid. And from the cerebrospinal fluid, it goes into the blood. And from the blood, it is transported to the outside through the respective organs. So, cerebrospinal fluid acts as a medium in between the nervous matter and the blood, and the nutrients pass from the blood through the cerebrospinal fluid to the cells of the nervous matter, and the waste products from the nervous matter get into the blood through the cerebrospinal fluid. So cerebrospinal fluid is a medium through which this exchange takes place. Now, that's all about brain. And by the way, while discussing the brain, I've already touched the spinal cord. This spinal cord. This is the spinal cord. The spinal cord. We shall see the spinal cord in our next lesson. So if you remember, I have told you that the central nervous system consists of the brain and the spinal cord. And the nerves from the brain, cranial nerves, and the nerves from the spinal cord, the spinal nerves. So we are at the second stage of the nervous system, that is the spinal cord. Cranial nerves and spinal nerves after the spinal cord. Now that's all for today. As I often say, that our lesson or this lecture is virtual. So you might have certain questions. You ask those questions in the comment section. I would answer all those questions. Actually, the science subject, particularly biology, I'll say, cannot be learned or taught in virtual, out of the classroom. We need classroom. We need a laboratory. How can I really explain what a brain is? Imagine if I bring a brain, a head of the skull of a goat and that of a rabbit, and show you actually what is it. That makes a sense. Anyway, there are limitations. So keeping those limitations in view, we are depending upon virtual lessons. And if you have questions, please ask in the comment section. I'll answer. Because without questions, there's no teaching. And without answers, there's no learning. You learn if you ask questions. And if you don't ask questions, you don't learn. Mahatma Gandhi said that a person or a student who doesn't ask questions is an idiot. He is a boy. He is not a student. Anyway, let's not get into that philosophy of education. Thank you very much for today.